Welcome to the Reel to Reel Wake Up movie review. And I'm Dean Val here with Dean Kevin, and today's movie is Ghostbusters 1984. And I will read a synopsis here first, if you haven't seen it before. But the film opens with the New York Public Library, where librarian Alice Drummond is first gathering books. Heading downstairs to a remote, empty section, she places a book back in the shelf, not noticing that the books behind her are levitating across the aisle. Later, she passes the card catalog shelves as they open behind her and suddenly begin to hurl their contents into the air. Frightened and screaming, she runs through the room before being stopped by an unseen ghost, which scares her terribly. This leads into the title card. After the opening title shot, the film continues in the Paramount Studios department of Columbia University, where Dr. Peter Venkman, Bill Murray, is conducting a test on ESP with a nerdy male student and an attractive female student. Venkman continually flirts and lies about her abilities while enjoying administering electric shocks to the male student. Having finally had enough, the male student departs and Venkman continues to flirt with the young woman. Dr. Ray Stantz, Dan Aykroyd, enters and frantically begins to tell Venkman about the sighting at the library, insisting they leave at once to check it out. Venkman makes a date with the student and follows Stantz out. Upon arriving at the library, Venkman and Stantz meet up with Dr. Egon Spengler, Harold Ramis, and Venkman proceeds to ask a series of personal and cynical questions about her medical and social history before the three head down to the area the ghost supposedly inhabits. While down there, the three men collect ectoplasmic residue, discover a tall symmetrical stacking of books from floor to ceiling, and narrowly escape a falling bookcase. Turning the same corner as the librarian, they see the ghost, the transparent form of an elderly lady, reading a book. Having no idea what to do, Venkman begins to talk to the ghost as if it were a lady in a bar. She shushes him before it starts. Stantz proclaims he knows what to do. They stealthily approach the ghost before Ray yells, "Get her!" and the ghost mutates into a ghoulish skeletal apparition, scaring the hell out of the trio, who run screaming from the library. They ignore the library administrator in their frantic way out. After they've calmed down a bit, they walk back to the university. Venkman mocks Ray's idiotic plan, and Egon announces that based on the readings, they now have a good chance of actually catching a ghost and holding it indefinitely. However, once they get back into the school, they meet the dean, who tells them that their grant has been terminated due to their shoddy and highly suspect findings, research, and methods. Peter and Ray sit drinking on campus, and Ray mopes about their bleak prospects before Peter suggests this turn of events happened so that they could go into business for themselves as the world's first firm for paranormal investigations and eliminations. Peter convinces Ray to take out a mortgage on his childhood home and use it for startup capital. The trio checks out an empty firehouse to use as a headquarters, and while Egon enumerates the many problems with the building itself, Ray is beside himself with excitement as the prospect of living and working there, especially with the firefighter Paul in the middle of the hall pole. At 555 Central Park West, classical musician Dana Barrett, played by Sigourney Weaver, arrives home with groceries. Her neighbor, Bernard and accountant Louis Tully, played by Rick Moranis, stops her in the hall telling her that her television has been left on. Louis badgers her about an upcoming party he's hosting, and Dana finally brushes him away and enters her apartment. As she's putting away the groceries, she notices that her eggs are now leaping out of the shells and cooking themselves on the countertop. She then hears a growl coming from her refrigerator, opens it, and sees an otherworldly temple and a dog-like creature that growls the word Zool, Zool, before Diana frantically slams the door shut. And by the way, Zool is the voice is Ivan Reitman's voice. He's the director. Back at the newly christened Ghostbusters headquarters, Ray pulls up, shocking Peter with a new business car, an old beat-up ambulance that needs a lot of work. Peter goes back inside and makes small talk with their new secretary, Janine, and waits around for business. Dana arrives seeking an explanation for the events in her kitchen. Peter flirts vigorously with her while Egon and Ray examine her briefly and speculate as to what may be the cause of her encounter. After deciding on a plan of action, Peter insists on going with Dana back to her apartment, where he haphazardly looks around but mostly flirts with her. He looks at the kitchen and sees the eggs on the counter, but nothing else seems out of the ordinary. Dana is annoyed, but Peter continues to beg her for a date, pledging to solve her problems in an effort to impress her. Later, the Ghostbusters sit around enjoying their dinner, celebrating getting their first customer. But Ray has to let them know that the meal has just used the last of their petty cash. Fortunately, even as the business failure is staring them in the face, Janine finally gets an urgent call about a ghost that needs removed immediately. Peter, Ray, and Egon quickly dress and race out of their headquarters for the Sedgwick Hotel, where the manager informs them of a ghost on the 12th floor. They always had problems, he tells them, but lately it's gotten out of hand. The Ghostbusters assure him they'll take care of it and head up to the 12th floor. Egon and Ray worry about their equipment, which Peter describes as unlicensed nuclear accelerator, and decide that they'll ignore the danger for now. They make chit-chat conversation with the guest outside the elevator, and they tell them they are going to kill a cockroach, to which the guest answers, "That's got to be some cockroach." He takes the next elevator. Almost immediately after the Ghostbusters exit the elevator, a maid startles them and they nearly kill her with their proton packs. The three split up and Ray eventually sees the ghost, a rotund green blob eating everything on the room service cart. Ray tries to hit it with the proton pack but misses and it flies away, frightened. Ray calls Peter on his walkie-talkie, and Peter, who is now face-to-face with the ghost, is suddenly attacked by it. Ray runs to Peter and finds him on his back, covered in green slime, but otherwise okay. Egon calls them and informs the other two that the ghost went into the hotel's ballroom. They calm the hotel manager and then set to work on containing the little green ghost. While shooting their weapons all over the room, Egon suddenly warns the others not to cross their streams because to do so would result in the destruction of all life as you know it. After destroying much of the ballroom with their seriously unstable proton packs, The Ghostbusters finally trap the ghosts and burst triumphantly from the ballroom before the anxious manager and a host of guests burst in. The Ghostbusters haggle with the manager over the $5,000 bill for a moment and then head back home, victorious. The successful hunt process proves to be but the first of a sudden rash of hauntings mean brisk business for the Ghostbusters. There's a montage of a series of missions, news spots, newspaper clippings, and stories about the Ghostbusters now new fame and success. They're even interviewed by Larry King and Joe Franklin, played by themselves. Peter briefly meets with Dana after her orchestra practice and flirts a bit with her before telling her about Zul, whom he has discovered is associated with an ancient Sumerian god of destruction, Gozer. He tells her that he'll go over it in more detail over dinner, and finally she agrees to a date. The Ghostbusters soon hire a fourth man, Winston Sedimore, a black, blue-collar type guy who is just looking for a job. Hired immediately by Ray and Peter, Winston is handed a couple of traps led off by Ray to learn about getting rid of the ghosts, while Peter is informed that there is a man from the EPA waiting for him. Walter Peck, the pompous EPA delegate, condescendingly talks to Peter, refusing to acknowledge that Peter is in fact a PhD and therefore Dr. Venkman, and briefly questions him about the possible environmental impact of their business, and specifically their custom-built storage facility. He demands to see it, but after Peter just patronizes him for a bit before throwing him out. Ray shows Winston how they unload the ghosts and they've trapped into the storage facility, while Egon admits he was worried about the facility's looming capacity problem and the larger problem it indicates. To illustrate, Egon tells them that his latest research indicates that the city is experiencing a colossal increase in paranormal activity, comparing it to 600-pound Twinkie. Peter joins them, mentioning the EPA, and memorably asks, what about the Twinkie? A brief shot on the top of Dana's building shows that dog-like gargoyle statues atop the roof are breaking apart and real animals are underneath the stone. Back inside, Dana arrives home and is once again accosted by Lewis, who is raving about the party. He is disappointed when Dana tells him she has a date. She gets rid of him again and goes into her apartment, undressing and talking on the phone. She sits in an armchair for a moment before noticing the same growling sounds from the kitchen. Before she can react, 3 arms burst out from the chair and hold Dana down as she is dragged through the kitchen door to one of the terror dogs. Another shot on the roof shows that the gargoyles on the roof have completely broken apart, and whatever was in them is loose. Lewis's party continues as he rambles on about the price efficiency of his hosting a party. 2 guests show up, hand Lewis their coats, and he throws them unnoticing on the terror dog sitting on the desk. It roars and bursts through the door, apparently only after Lewis. He runs out of the apartment through Central Park and before being cornered and attacked outside Tavern on the Green. Meanwhile, Peter arrives at Dana's apartment, stepping over the carnage of Lewis's party, and knocks on the door. Dana opens it, dressed in a slinky red dress, and asks, "Are you the keymaster?" Peter says no, and she angrily slams the door in his face. He knocks again and enters after answering her question, "Yes." Dana says that she is Zul, and they must prepare for the coming of Gozer, the Destructor. Peter talks to her and resists the possessed Dana aggressive advances before requesting to speak with the real Dana. At first, Dana coyly replies, "There is no Dana, there is only Zool," trying to kiss him. But Peter, still trying to get through to the real Dana, Barrett, restrains her. The possessed Dana now becomes visibly annoyed at his persistence. As Peter once again inquires about the real Dana, and she replies in an unearthly demonic voice, "There is no Dana, only Zool." Peter sarcastically dismisses her and gives her the count of 3 to talk to the real Dana. With each count, Dana presents further signs of her possession, at first demonically rolling her eyes, then panting like an animal, and finally roaring like a demonic beast and magically floating above her bed. She turns over in midair to face down at Peter, whom asks her to please come down. Dana roars fiercely at him, finally frightening him. Louis, looking disheveled and generally abused, runs out of the Central Park rambling and asks that a handsome cab horse if he is the gatekeeper. The driver chases him off, so he runs away, screaming about a sign of Gozer's arrival. The New York Police Department arrives at the Ghostbusters headquarters to drop off Louis, who's been captured and rejected by both the city jail and Bellevue's psych ward. Egon looks at him briefly and takes him aside. Louis reveals his name is Vince Clortho, Keymaster of Gozer. He goes on about the history of Gozer, how the god assumes various forms and would mean the destruction of civilization he targets. During the exam, Peter calls in and tells Egon about the developments with Dana, who is now lies heavily sedated on the bed next to him. Egon tells Peter to return about Louis's psychic transformation and insists Peter come back to headquarters. Winston and Ray are driving back to the office, Winston driving while Ray examines the very odd blueprints of Dana's apartment building. Winston asks Ray about his belief in God, and speculates that the reason they've been so busy lately is because the dead have been rising from the grave, as it was foretold in the book of Revelations as a precursor to Judgment Day and the end of the world. Ray ponders this. Back at headquarters, Walter Peck has returned with a court order. A cop and a Con Edison worker intent on shutting down the storage facility. Egon tries to talk him out of it, and Peter arrives just in time to antagonize Peck some more, before the cop intervenes and the Con Ed guy, although highly reticent handling equipment he has never seen before, shuts off the power grid. A warning buzzer sounds and everyone clears the building as the storage facility rumbles and begins to destroy the basement. A supernatural light show occurs as all kinds of paranormal energy bursts through the building and shoots out of the roof. Across town, Dana immediately wakes up from her sedation and walks toward her living room window. Louis is excited, claiming this is the sign he was waiting for. Ray and Winston arrive to witness the disaster's immediate aftermath, even as Peck demands they all be arrested for causing it. Enraged at this self-righteous blowhard outright lying about them while ignoring his own responsibility in the disaster, Egon attacks Peck, getting everyone arrested. Ghosts run rampant through the city, but most of the energy seems to run directly to the Dana's building. Dana growls at the energy, ripping out the wall of her apartment in a small explosion. Sitting in jail, Ray shows Egon and Peter and the blueprints of Dana's apartment building, pointing out highly unorthodox methods and materials, especially near the roof. Egon tells them that the building he's discovered was designed by an insane architect surgeon named Ivo Shandor in the 20s. Shandor was evidently so disgusted by the First World War that he decided he would try to bring about the end of the world with a secret society of Gozer worshippers. They performed rituals on top. Dana's building, and the roof itself was meant to be a gateway to allow Gozer into our world. A guard arrives and tells the Ghostbusters that the mayor wants to meet them to deal with the rash of ghosts and other unbelievable phenomena happening throughout the city. Lewis arrives at Dana's demolished apartment, introducing himself as the Keymaster. A smiling Dana responds she is the gatekeeper, and they share a passionate kiss before slowly making their way up the roof via a mythical staircase behind the wall where Dana's fridge used to be as a lightning flashes ominously. The four men and Peck are brought before the mayor, both arguing their sides. Peck claims the Ghostbusters are con artists and use nerve gases to force people to hallucinate and have visions of ghosts. Winston steps up and defends the things he's seen as real, while numerous city officials like the fire chief present evidence of bizarre phenomena of which the Ghostbusters have the only possible explanation. Ray appeals to the possibility that the mayor could be responsible for saving the lives of millions of registered voters. Convinced, the mayor throws Peck out of his office and offers whatever support he can to the Ghostbusters. People have gathered all around the apartment building, which has clearly become the center of the entire mess. They cheer as the Ghostbusters arrive with a police escort, and following National Guard troops, and Peter mugs for the crowd. The four men put on their proton packs and are prepared to enter, but a sudden earthquake seems to swallow them beneath the street. Eventually, they emerge unharmed to the continued cheers from the crowd. They band together and head inside. Once inside, they must climb the stairs to Dana's 22nd floor apartment. Dana and Lewis lie in a large stone table as lightning flashes in the dark and shows them. Dana seductively wakes up, followed by Lewis. They stare in awe at the large temple in front of them, then walk toward the opposite stone pedestals where the terror dog statues once stood. The Ghostbusters arrive to find Dana's apartment burned and more or less destroyed. They see the staircase in one of the kitchen and go up. Dana and Lewis stand on their pedestals and raise their arms to the sky. They are suddenly struck by bolts of lightning, which they redirect toward the temple door, causing it to grind open and signaling the arrival of Gozer, the Gozman. With the temple doors finally open, Dana and Lewis now absorb their full power as the Ghostbusters arrive just in time to see the lightning converge on the demonic couple in a huge blast, transforming them back into the monstrous terror dogs, who now turn and roar menacingly at the Ghostbusters before leaping towards the side of the temple doors. Gozer appears in the form of an exotic female with a tall, dark, flat top and blood-red eyes. Egon points out that she's not really a woman, but rather takes the shape of whatever it wants. Peter goads Kay into talking to her. Ray very formally requests that Gozer returns to her place of origin, but she responds by asking if he is a god. He says no, and Gozer responds by shooting lightning from her fingers and nearly hurling the Ghostbusters off the roof. They regroup and decide to attack Gozer, but she nimbly jumps clear of their streams and lands behind them. Another attack proves fruitless as she disappears rather than being caught in the streams. Believing they are victorious, the Ghostbusters begin to celebrate, but it is short-lived as Gozer's booming voice is heard above the city demanding that they choose the form of the Destructor. Peter tells everyone to clear their minds and think of nothing, so no form will be given. But it is clearly too late. Ray admits he did his best, but something just popped into his mind, something he thought could never harm anyone. It's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. A 10-story white puffy marshmallow man begins to walk the streets of the city, crushing everything underfoot. And when he is close enough to the Ghostbusters, open fire, setting Mr. Stay Puft ablaze as he begins to climb the building King Kong style. Running for cover, the Ghostbusters appear out of ideas until Egon suggests that they cross the streams in an effort to close the door and destroy Gozer's portal. Realizing this will probably mean their doom, the Ghostbusters go ahead with the plan and set off to finish the god. Crossing the streams does indeed result in a catastrophic explosion, destroying the temple and incinerating the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, raining molten marshmallow all over the street, including an onlooking Walter Peck. Back on the roof, the Ghostbusters have survived and slowly emerge from the rubble, covered with marshmallow. Peter finds the roasted carcasses of the terror dogs and believes Dana dead. Behind him, though, her fingers crack through the hardened ruins of the animal, and the Ghostbusters quickly break apart the rest, freeing her and Lewis. They leave the roof, and Winston exclaims, "I love this town." As the closing credits roll, the Ghostbusters return to the street to the roaring cheers of the crowd. Peter and Dana kiss in front of everyone. Lewis is helped into an ambulance, and as they drive off, the green ghost from the hotel roars toward the camera as it fades to black. So this is it was a fun movie. It's kind of lighthearted, but you see all the elements here of what they're doing with the destruction of the world now. All these things are implanted in the movie as humor, lighthearted humor, but the sacrifices, the destruction, the psychic warfare that's going on now, just all kinds of things that I'm sure Kevin will cover here. So I'll give it over to you, Kevin. Thank you.
And so we have the Ghostbusters, a group of individuals who would find themselves in circumstances where their simulated experience would be shared and converge. As I have mentioned on most of these reviews, and as it is with anything, experience-wise, nothing can be so unless we decide it. For this is the design of a simulator created for a singular purpose, which is to provide an overall comparison by which we can recognize what the true reality, the isness, is. The is the real reality, that which we actually are, that which our true essence, our real awareness is a part of, and that which we must recognize to be able to stand in this position as real awareness, isness, everything, hence the necessity for simulated creational realms, the is reflecting itself into what is really a vast, multi-dimensional, virtual reality computer game, the mechanics of which allow that whatever is decided by each individual becomes simulated experience, a cause and effect mechanic. It would be like deciding on certain files and adding them to our computer, with the simulation effected from these files appearing on the screen as our simulated game, and the decoding mechanisms of decided ideas or files to simulated experience would be the apparatus of the physical vehicle, the senses. Picture the consciousness as the overall computer with all its files, all the ideas we have decided upon, and the mechanics of the computer converts the files to graphics and imagery on the screen, and there is your simulated experience. And picture also you, the real awareness, as that which operates the computer. And we can see then that the computer, all it contains, all the ideas that make up our simulated game, from the scenery to the body forms, to the very personality, attitudes and drives, are mechanics, an overall consciousness that the real awareness operates through, to experience what has been decided as to the consciousness construction for the ultimate real purpose objective of recognizing the ears from the comparisons that everything created, everything that consciousness effects into simulation provides. We have our individual consciousness then, that effects simulation according to what we decide. We have the greater overall simulator that consciousness overall effects, a vast multi-dimensional stadium, whereas every consciousness is a part of its construction, so every personal self can potentially enter each other's simulation, as it is a simulation shared, just like a multiplayer computer game. And what has individuals more so directly in our experience, the difference between an individual who lives, say, in a different country to us, or the next door neighbour, that yes, both are accessible, as we share overall the same simulated creational realm, but it is the extent to the ideas we share, the extent to how many match up, that we have decided upon, that must have our experience more so shared, that facilitates accessibility. My next door neighbour must have ideas that pertain to the affected planet, country and street he is in, that match with my own, hence how closely our simulated situation matches up when it comes to drives, goals, intents, ambitions, and that which we chase in a creation. These ideas also can match up with others, and again, if ideas match, so will the effects that follow be more aligned. So my next door neighbour has a certain geographical ideas in the consciousness that coincide with mine, but if he also had ideas in his consciousness that were also aligned in regards to that which we chase in creation, our interests, etc., then very likely we will converge even more so. We may attend the same stamp collecting club, for example, or UFO spotting group, or whatever the inclination may be. So, overall, experiences between individuals converge and align more so as the ideas in the consciousness, the agreements and attachments, are similar or the same. And as lifetimes go by, the consciousness tends to become routined with certain avenues of interest, and so as we share experience with those of similar or the same decided ideas of interest, so very likely we will keep encountering them lifetime after lifetime, and continuously share these same simulations that effect from these same ideas. And as we add emotional attachment to not only the ideas and interests we chase, but to the individuals that we encounter, for as we keep encountering them, this builds up a familiarity, though not consciously recognized, which makes every subsequent encounter with them seem even more familiar, and more likely we will with greater ease continue our friendship, our association, our emotional attachment with them, with each lifetime around that we encounter them again. As such, we form these little consciousness groups, where the ideas of the consciousness of each converge, and so will readily continue sharing experience along these collective consciousness decided lines, with the additional emotional attachment to the ideas that are the body types of the individuals involved, that unless an individual breaks such attachments or decides to experience something else, and thus the ideas of the consciousness no longer match those of the group, then all individuals within the group will be maintained in each other's little shared bubble of agreed-to simulation, and spin off across endless lifetimes with their shared experiences. For the Ghostbusters then, Peter, Ray, Winston and Egon, evidently a little collective consciousness group that have once again found themselves experiencing a shared simulation, a simulator overall, but more directly featuring in each other's direct simulation through common consensus of ideas decided through each consciousness. And it is rather apparent that these are the sort of individuals that have a penchant for chasing the paranormal. This would be the main idea, focus, and thrust of their consciousness, that which they chase in creation, expressed in this lifetime as they finding each other and forming a ghost-busting team. which may express however it might in other lifetimes, according to the planet or time phase in cause and effect human history they find themselves in. Probably then, the overall idea of what they chase individually as ideas in creation would be along that which is beyond the established norms. And when they each determined this as their decided general experience in creation, who can say? So we can construe this group as being risk-takers, doing that which wouldn't be exactly socially acceptable according to the social consciousness as it was at the time of this movie, being in the 80s. But in more recent times, humanity is a little more accepting of that which is beyond the controller-presented social consciousness designed surface one-dimensional world that most are generally in agreement with consciously and subconsciously. And of course, if ideas remain the same, the effect experience equally remains so, and with the vast majority content with a very mundane and generally boring and uninspiring experience, which stems from a carefully managed and controlled dark force consciousness, then awareness rather stagnates, as the idea is to become more aware, to continuously become aware of more than what we know, and what we know at any given moment is the consciousness as it stands, and how we have decided or agreed as to its idea programming. So we rather do have to risk-take to see more, and we can only do that if we decide differently to what we have been, and with a managed controller consciousness, this generally involves deciding on that which isn't acceptable according to the controller designed social consciousness. But then, with any created idea, we can become absorbed in, fixated upon, and regardless of it being perhaps beyond the established normals of ideas, we do need to see through all ideas to the realization of what they are and the simulation they effect, a simulation that is for our recognition of the is, and as the real beings of awareness we actually are, aside from all created ideas.
Okay, I see Peter's here and Tim. Do you guys have any comments? Hello?
Well, I certainly do. This is Peter.
Hi, Peter.
I have some very humorous and unique anecdotes that relate to this Ghostbuster movie. Absolutely. And incredibly, you know. So just as an introduction, I'm Tweety Bud from Pan Eagle from New York City, where I was born in the Manhattan. And my name was Peter Adams, which is like Atom or Adam or something like that. Adams meaning, I think my name means the first rock man. And joke about that here and there, but I've also have a certain vast experience with movie watching. I've seen, I would suggest, probably almost everything, and certainly all of the great movies, of which I'd like to say Ghostbusters, yes, was a profound moment in movie making history. And I'm also going to connect with Peter, that is the Bill Murray character, who was, as was said, wanted to create the funds or fundraising to begin the Ghostbuster business, B.I. Zool or whatever, that this characters and these people are running actually in true reality in New York City as the media center of the world, or at least one of them primarily. So my experience related also to my father, who worked at 666 Fifth Avenue. And I actually worked there as well in the summer of Woodstock, 1969. And he was a very, very good accountant, an executive accountant. And I never connected that 666 Fifth Avenue for a long time. But here, when you were talking about it, you said that they were on Fifth Avenue or Fifth Street or something along those lines. And so what happened in my experience was I came to Florida and got married, and I have a stepson whose favorite movie is the Ghostbusters. And my stepson has a friend, a spirit, that he's called Maverick, because this is his favorite character from the movies in the Top Gun Tom Cruise movie. By the way, this year, they're supposed to, in the next 24 months or 12 months, put out another Ghostbusters renewal and Top Gun, which has been well overdue now. So with this intimate related experience, I also had this favorite movie be a focus point so for our family, and I've used it from time to time discussing my stepson and whatever experience. He's a autistic spectrum individual, and yes, he does play video games intensely every day. I am, in a sense, in the center of the ghost-busting house. Something like that. Nonetheless, okay, so we took a trip to New York, and my stepson and his mother had never been to Manhattan. I took him on a tour of Manhattan. When we first got up there, it took us 7 hours, but the very first place that we went to when we came through the tunnel from the west side was to park and stop, because it was kind of a trying drive to get there. And we stopped right at the Ghostbusters house, the firehouse, where they filmed the movie. So I took 3 pictures while I was there. And these pictures that I took show this something like a big white hand or ghostly imprint over the pictures. I was about, across the street from the firehouse in the car, and we were stopped, and I just took these pictures, and they were like white spots on the image, and it's very dusky and looking. It's not clear. It's in clear sunlight day, but these pictures just came out completely different, and it's just I'm just going, what the, when we saw these pictures when we drove back you know, leaving New York, we visited family and drove south and said, look at these pictures I took. It's like, I had no idea. And just, you know, mind blowing, really. Anyway, so the rest of the story is this. I think that the real ghost busting in New York, or the real creation of the ghost busting necessity and the film related industry, has a lot to do with the film sets and the setup that this movie had. I think that the Ghostbusters, or what we'll say the ghosts, kind of had an opportunity to come on in and invade New York and invade the media network. It was a huge feedback loop of the entire New York media and community. It was a huge success. And anything in New York that's a huge success is just going to be, you know, over the top, all over the place. That's just the way the New Yorkers are, and the place is. You know, I mean, King Kong, Empire State Building, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this whole thing is all interrelated, and you can see that with the development of the movie and everything that, yeah, Kevin, right on the whole thing, the whole story dynamic that's there, or relation. Now, I have one other experience which relates personally, that wasn't, it was in New York, and this is a very profound experience that I had. I went to the concert in Shea Stadium in 1970. It was a peace love concert created by Pete Seeger, who was a primary individual in the entire New York folk scene and environmental movement, saving trees, saving the natural environment, and creating wanting to create an environment of peace and love and cooperation and humanity and compassion. A very central figure was this person. Now, in 1964, that's 6 years before, the greatest concert perhaps in New York City, the most remembered concert, was when the Beatles came, first concert outdoors at Shea Stadium in 1964. That was 6 years to the day, almost, that concert I attended in 1970 was the next concert to have been created or done at that location. There were no other rock concerts in that stadium until 1970s. Now, the experience I had there was a profound, what I call a cosmic consciousness experience. And I told this to a friend just yesterday or 2 days ago, someone I just met. I told him about it. And while I was telling him, I was getting goosebumps and waves over my head. It was very strong. You know, not going into what the experience was, except for one thing, which was I had this visage, and this was like seeing an individual over the stadium, over in the sky, so to speak. And that individual, I think, was one of the new guides. Vupoints is who I think it was. And I very definitely felt this wave, we'll call it, tremendous, tremendous love. I suppose that's what, you know, I interpreted it as. And it was, I've never forgotten it, and it's been with me ever since. And I've always known that was a real thing, a real experience, and that's reality being shared. And so that's how I'm seeing this whole story. Also, without further ado, I will say that the movie, being such an explosion of consciousness in a way, Similarly, back in the late 60s, Paul Twitchell, Chariot, and Eckankar was actually a kind of experience of opening that whole door. I think what happened was that the whole group of the whole opened the astral plane door completely, and all that flooded in with the drugs, sex, rock and roll, and all of that stuff, etc. There's a whole huge consciousness movement, etc. Not that we're talking about that being from the real guides or any such, not in that essence, but it certainly was like a step that I think we are now approaching, just as we'll say these Ghostbusters and Top Guns are coming back with their renewal movies. They're really trying to get through, we are trying to get through what the real thing is, which has nothing to do with these time and space events and so forth. But this movie opens up our consciousness too to this other side, to the real side, that is, in that sense, even though, yes, it's just a view into the astral plane or the fourth dimension, whatever, and gives people a chance to see that there's more here than they think there is, and ghosts are real, alternative experience is real, or whatever it is, of whatever kind it is. And that's how I put this together. I just wrote it all down while you were talking, and I am very happy to be able to report on it as one of these really dynamic artistic creations, this movie that had the entire focus of the at least the American and the media society of the world at the time. That's one of the reasons we review these movies, and that's a significant thing, to be looking at them, to discuss and know what's really going on, where did this really come from, and why did it happen, when it happened, and what is happening now that's all in reference to that, this media mind control, etc., is just one example. It's and how they're continually using it with now the covidity, alienation, and the specifically the artificial intelligence dynamic that's present here. So with that, thank you. By the way, Harold Ramis was the other character that was Bill Murray's partner, Harold. Oh, it's just crazy. So, okay, thanks very much, Val.
Thanks, Peter. Tim, did you have a comment or two?
Well, I guess it's interesting what is presented to experience all this different stuff, like Dwayne wrote in one of his his books about the ghost when he was little on the way from Minnesota to California. And it's not like there's a whole lot of people that are aware at all of it actually being a real thing. Most people don't seem to have hardly any experiences with ghosts, with their dead relatives or anything anywhere. At least I'm not aware of the majority of people having any experiences with the ghosts. We might have been ghosts once ourselves too for a while, who knows. Yeah, they sure can make a lot of I guess you call it interesting for the masses pictures.
Yeah, I find it interesting how the progression has come through the media, movies, TV, how we started off with well, at least in the 50s, 60s, with like Bewitched and Casper the Ghost, and uh, I Dream of Jeannie, Topper, all these little fun kind of things, friendly, Casper the Friendly Ghost, all these like innocent kind of, and then it's progressed into what we have now, which is like demonic, really demonic kind of monsters, aliens, that are totally off the chart, in terms of that. But politicians, TV evangelists, they're all like, yeah, they're all like, we had to get kind of acclimated to it. They couldn't go there right away, but they had to kind of make it innocent looking first. And now it's a standard to have all these like gruesome entities in our imagery, from the TV movies. And it's really happening though. But again, they're showing us what's happening in the movies. Yeah, go ahead, Kevin. The next one, thanks.
So, our consciousness is constructed as we decide, comprising of our personality, routine emotions, and reactions, that which we chase, our general intent and inclinations, a vehicle that we experience the corresponding simulation through, a simulation that gives us what we have decided through our programming of the consciousness. And when the physical vehicle expires, we transition to the next position. As we are multi-dimensional, the consciousness affects the simulation through all the aspects of the created self that we utilize to generate the ideas, the thoughts, emotions, etc., and each of these facilities are vehicles in their own right and affect life levels, dimensional areas of simulated creation also. The emotional vehicle is the astral body and affects the astral level, the mental mind bodies into the causal and mental dimensions, the imagination into the etheric. Where we go after we vacate the physical body depends on what we have decided, what we have recognized. For despite every individual being multi-dimensional, where they position their awareness in creational terms is according to what they have recognized. Most individuals are what we would call physical astral. They have their focus primarily on the one-dimensional physical level, and their general intent is along emotional, satiating lines, as the sensation body is the one that tends to captivate people the most. As such then, focus and fixation on a physical level, absent of awareness of the other unseen dimensional areas and parts of the self, and a continuous drive to experience sensation through the astral vehicle, will ensure that when most individuals vacate the physical body, they will find themselves in the next available position, the astral. As they didn't take the time to either be aware of anything else, any other potential dimensional position, or to recognize how to position themselves there. To position beyond the astral must have an individual able to let go of the astral body. For to cling to any aspect of the created self is a decision to experience and be resigned to it, and on a transition this translates as a limitation of position. In the case of most, the astral level is as far as they will go. To bypass the consciousness, the mind and emotions, and the life levels effected from them would require decision to do so, but also a releasing of these aspects of the self that unshackle the individual and allow them to access the full creational simulator and all the dimensions of it. For we each experience exactly what we decide, as is the nature of creation, and the less aware we are, the more our ideas and considerations are limited, the less recognition we have of the multi-dimensional nature of ourselves, the more limited will be our positioning on a transition, to the extent that even individuals on the astral, after passing from the physical, can be oblivious to where they are. Such was their focus on the one-dimensional physical level, and consequently they may even be unable to perceive even the astral. For although each vehicle has the mechanics, so to speak, to perceive the life level it effects, what we are aware of and can recognize can diminish our dimensional perceptions. For in reality, when we transition, we stand in every dimensional level, and everything, in fact, as everything is. What we experience then is according to what we have decided, what we can recognize. We stand in real universes now, with all the overlapping dimensional life levels, and which of the overlapping life levels we experience depends on what we recognize. The idea would be to see through all ideas, all aspects of the personal self, through all overlapping dimensional layers, and be the real awareness isness that is encased within them all. But with individuals who are very unaware and self-limited, as I said, even the astral level may not be perceivable for them on a transition. They may, in fact, still be perceiving the physical level they transitioned from, despite absence of the physical body. As such, you can have individuals that on a transition don't realize they have died. They can still hold to the physical level, and according to their abilities, can interact with it to various degrees and extents. For everything is according to what we decide. If we decide we haven't passed over, if we hold to that consideration, and that we therefore should be able to interact still with the physical level, for us this will be our reality. And so you have what we call ghosts, individuals that are somewhat stuck between the physical and the next position, the astral, most of which don't realize they have died. assume that they haven't, and so even absent of a physical body, will remain in this position. And for them, everything may look exactly as it did on the physical, for on the real side, everything is according to thought and imagination, instantaneous manifestation of ideas. But most won't realize this, and assume the same limitations apply as are so through the decided consciousness that affects the physical level. And so those on the real side, or those having transitioned, may apply the same self-limitations of body form, even of physical level ailments or conditions. And for the individual that doesn't realize they have transitioned, that clings adamantly onto the contention they are still on the physical and in their physical level circumstances, as everything beyond the physical is by instant thought and imagination, they will recreate the physical level situation they had left behind on the real side, and this for them will seem very real. And as they harbour attachment to what they were on the physical, they remain linked with it, almost bridging dimensions, a recreated simulation of their simulated physical level life, but one that is linked and connected with the actual physical level simulation, and depending on the individual, dictates to what extent they can effect on the physical, if they can move items around, like disruptive poltergeist, or indeed take on a form that is perceivable to individuals from the physical. Most ghosts would simply be trapped in their own illusions of a physical life they have left behind, and go unnoticed by anyone on the physical level. But all individuals are different, and according to their consciousness and how it is constructed, will be the extent to which they can impact and influence the physical from what would be for them the astral dimensional level. Reptilians, for example, can operate from the astral and affect the physical, operating in a way that would be behaviour we would associate with the poltergeists. They have developed this ability, and other individuals may have this ability also, though not conscious of it, until such a situation occurs, such as this, where they transition, cling onto their physical level position, recreate it on the real side, but are also impacting then the physical level from this astral position with ability they didn't realize they had. And as they may not even recognize they had transitioned, they therefore may not even realize they are being disruptive on the physical level. And especially if an individual has a very sudden and traumatic death, can the individual not realize they have died, and more likely hold themselves in this between physical level and astral position. For even with an unconscious, unaware individual, if they are well prepared for death and, say, deteriorate slowly, they are more accepting of the situation. In acknowledgement of the fact their body vehicle is due to expire, even if they haven't any awareness of what will happen beyond the physical and the various dimensional life levels, etc. And there can even be situations where individuals take on the consideration, the idea, that when death comes, they will rot in the ground for eternity. And as we always experience what we decide, for them, this can actually be the case. Their awareness locked in a rotting corpse, whereas such isn't necessary, and it's only a decision away that can rectify what was, after all, what they had chosen to experience.
Thank you, Kevin. Notice how, yeah, these ghosts, they take their desires with them, or whatever they have, their proclivities, their ideas. Like the green guy took, he's a glutton, eating all the time, and the lady reading the book in the library, the ghosts, and the destroyer, Zool. I mean, that's what they do, they destroy. So people take everything with them, attitudes, desires, etc., and then they can play them out there sometimes, or physical astral, play them out, get absorbed in them and get lost in them in a way, so that they don't see that there's more. You can be obsessed. I mean, these people are obsessed, basically, some of these ghosts, you could say, with something. Either they're angry that they died in a certain way, or they're they're bewildered in some instances, but sometimes they're just obsessed with things and they want to lash out, so they come back and do what they can.
Yeah, Pete here. I'm particularly fond of the humor side of this, the playful characterizations and jovial moods, even of the Ghostbusters, facing the end of the world or some such disaster, and or confronting the Zool, in the woman played by Sigourney Weaver. By the way, Sigourney Weaver was an attendee at that 1964 Beatles concert, or the Ed Sullivan Show, one of the two major events of the Beatles' English invasion into New York, coincidentally. And her character, she was the Zool, the ghost, walk-in, correct? Into her body?
Well, she was the host.
She was the host, right.
Yeah.
So she wasn't the destroyer, she was the messenger. Would you say?
Well, when they mated, I think they brought in the other guy with a G. It started with a G. And she was Zool. Yeah, but she was Zool until they mated, and Gozer came. I don't think in her, but he opened up a channel for him to come.
That's their union created the channel for him to come.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's definitely all that kind of sexual union, intercourse idea, naturally, because you'll see that throughout all the movies. They're always using all of these primary ideas: survival, sexual, racial identities, and like that. And also a lot of the hierarchies that are existing throughout this dimensional controlled matrix, you know, like that. And you know, even the way the movies are made are built on this kind of a format, and beginning, middle, and end writing formula, and also relating to, just without going into it, holy trinities of all kinds. Again, that activity, the law of three, and it's all of that. That's how this third dimension is controlled or manifested from the other dimensions, the fourth dimension in particular, here into this dimension. So there's these intermediary levels, like purgatory, heaven, purgatory, in the physical plane, physical body, like that. And you know, so they're always stepping in, saying, we're going to act as your intermediary. And here Zuul has used the woman acting as an intermediary, and then he jumped to becoming or building the Gozer, which you know, when I grew up, the friendly ghost, Casper, I loved Casper. You know, I read the comics, and the movie came later after I'd stopped watching it, more or less. But there was TV show for sure, and all of that stuff, you know. And there was the whole implantations that they had started to form, which you mentioned, and how it grew. So up until our time, you know, so this is like this whole progression. I think it's actually almost a reverse progression of what we really want to do and be. And you have to actually, this was a thought that I heard way back in the 80s, because when this movie came out was our and yours, I think too, Val, first years in Eckankar, and our studies there. One of the ideas that came through was this, I might have lost the thought on it, so maybe I'll come back to it. But excuse me, I lost that train a little bit. But there's one other thing in the movie, is the part you mentioned, Val, about Peter tells the crowd to clear your mind, and that for nothing can be created. If your mind is clear, nothing can be, well, something can be implanted, and you know, like that. But if it's like clearing your tap lines, if you clear your lines of control, you can, this event or creation will not be created by, you know, in the simulator, which is the ghost, I think, represents the simulator. Now, do you think I've got that right? Do you have any ideas or sharings on that particular one yourself?
Yeah, makes sense. It's simulator to create. I mean, they created, so that's their creation. It's kind of symbolic or demonstrating the creation, and the way they at least have the intent to destroy it. You know, the controllers. That's their creation.
Yeah, not only that, to manifest the reality of the ghost and its whole field of consciousness and its whole reality, its simulation, to buy into it. That's the primary activity, is not whether it's real or not, is that, well, people will buy into it. And therefore, they are caught there. And, you know, a ghost who's unwilling to look at where he's at can't escape. He's bought into the reality that he's already accepted, and he's unwilling to deny it. I recently had an experience with, on the real side, with my best friend who I grew up with, has the same birth date as me. He unfortunately continued the entire drug related addicted behavioral group Um, it's actually a form of hazing, but in any case, you know, hazing in a larger sense, you know, like in the haze. In any case, it was a recent experience. I was with him in a restaurant, and he was really just under the control and in this, and he didn't even hardly recognize me. And I got, that's where he's at. He's caught. He did die of an accidental overdose, and he's caught in that in-between world. That's where he's at, and you know, he wants to be there. And he doesn't want to acknowledge someone who came to him and said, hey, you know, I think came to him trying to say, hey, here I am, you know, hey, wake up, you know, what's going on? And, you know, yeah, all throughout the inner levels, that was a demonstration of that model of what do we call it? Tap line, behavioral control. And I let go of that probably back in that experience in 1970, but you know, I realized that all of that addictive, habitual, or controlled attitudinal system is you know, yeah, you know, I just don't want any part of that. A social system, etc. Don't want to really be you know, what we'd say a lord and savior of that stuff, because that's another one that they're hazing everybody with, the Lord and saving. And here we go, Ghostbusters represented very clearly and strongly. We're going to save you. We've got the guns, we've got the ghost busting machine, and you know, we've got the technology, and we're gonna take care of you, and we're gonna wipe out all this negativity and you know, ghost imaging, another term, you know. It's all these terms that we get, you know, are, yeah, they're just the references, because they use these terms like hypnotism, like engrams, which is something the Scientologists talk about, and this is a programming model. It's profound in the movies, the people who are in the movies, and they're profoundly unaware that they're being controlled by it. Yet they continue to make movies where they're playing characters who are demonic or negatively controlled and mafiaed, et cetera, you know, and they're proud to be playing these gunslingers or cops and robbers and et cetera, and demonstrating that they're putting forth this whole consciousness idea of what society should be, or what it is, not necessarily what it should be, but because it is, we need to make movies about it and report on it and demonstrate it. But they're not demonstrating it from the point of view of saying, you know, you got to wake up and stop doing all this stuff. They're saying, no, it's just going on, and yes, these people shouldn't be doing it, and we're not maybe wanting to do it, but by making the film, which is a dual image, a two-dimensional image, that's a polarity, in other words, these movies are made. And the people have totally bought into that, and the lifestyle of the rich and famous, and et cetera, all of that, you know, ego identification, and you know, yeah, whatever you can get them thinking that they're holier than thou, even if they don't realize that's what they're actually being given as a principle of activity, you know, or of attitudinal basis. So, you know, that's enough. Thanks, Val. That's great.
Thanks, Peter.
Great movie for all of this stuff.
Yeah. Tim?
It's interesting when we talk about these ghosts and what they're showing in the movie, how does the Lords of Karma fit into this being sticking around? Because it isn't it up to them to just take you to where I guess where they want to take you. So I don't, there's so much unaware of about all this stuff in life. We talk about ghosts and we talk about the Lords of Karma, janitors or whatever they are. So it's hard to fit things together, why some can stick around and why some are taken right away, either by them or the reptilians, or lots of comparisons of things. How does it look?
Yeah. Tim and I were treasure hunting a few years back. I wonder if in Oregon, I wonder if you'd like to share their experience with the Indians there, Tim.
Yeah, when I was first deciding to go up and look around from an old man that was saying that there was a batch of gold that had been stashed by the Indians up in the hills there above Hellgate Canyon here in Southwest Oregon. I was going up there, beautiful day, sunny, and just roaming around looking, seeing what things looked like. And I got way up the hill, which I'd heard was the Indians in the area's spiritual hill or mountain. But anyway, I got way up the hill and I came to a spot where the rock was like cliffs, kind of concave, maybe 60 or so feet wide of the rock face cliffs. And for some reason, I looked up to the top of the rock formation, and there seemed to be what I was looking at were Indians around, spaced apart around on top of the rim of this rock cliff. And they didn't seem friendly at all in the appearance that I looked at. They seemed anyway, I guess you'd call it, I was scared of the appearance, and it was like the feeling was just to get out of there. So that was all it was I just went. and actually, I don't think I looked back. I just had the feeling to get out of there. So
Yeah,
it makes you wonder sometimes what's going on. Yeah. What you see in life. There's experiences lots of different people have, myself included, with the things in the sky, whether it's aliens or something. Like one time when I saw a light in the sky and I'm looking at it and wondering what is that, and a couple of swept wing fighter jets took off of a Naval Air Force base across Puget Sound from where I was, right at the thing in the sky, one right behind the other, going right towards it, and the thing started just getting pulsating, and it was getting brighter and brighter as it pulsated, and then it just disappeared right in my eyes as those jets were going right up towards it, and then it appeared like right away over Everett, which was some miles away, visible again. How it could be over there when it was just there in about the same seconds was really interesting. So we get all kinds of things that make us wonder sometimes in life, whether it's a huge cluster of lights going across the evening sky, like in the shape of like bowling pins, and the point led the way and everything perfectly spread apart and real huge. And other times when you're going across the desert or something, driving along, and all of a sudden your vehicle totally dies, no juice. And then some minutes later, you're wondering what's going on, and all of a sudden everything works again. So there's all kinds of stuff. You don't know these invisible entities or ghosts or that are left to hang around instead of the lords of karma or something taking them somewhere for whatever purpose they have to take them. Anyway, so many different people have so many different experiences about different things they see and hear. And if you think back, sometimes you can remember things you've heard that you wonder what was those words or noises coming from. So I guess that in a way it's nice not to have any of these things called ghosts to deal with, being attracting someone's attention about what is it and why.
Yeah, this experience with the Indians happened when you were younger, when Tim was younger. So when we did the treasure hunting, it was only 4 or 5 years ago, and Tim was older. But we did try to contact these Indians to help, to see if we could make amends if they were angry at the white people or they had an attitude. But we had a couple seers that were helping us find the treasure that we're looking for, and they even suggested we bring gifts, physical gifts. I spent the night once there trying to contact them, but of no avail. Nobody showed up. Nobody there to point the way to where the treasure was. So we never did find it, but it was a great adventure.
And as we experience always what we decide, anything that befalls us adversely is equally what we have in reality chosen to experience. The consciousness simply generates experience based on what ideas we have agreed to that make up its construction. In each lifetime, we are aware of the choices we are making, the agreements we are forging, but all agreements remain, like files on the computer, unless we erase them, remove them, as the idea would be to experience what we do from them, then release them. But most people will simply add these agreement ideas into their consciousness. The experiences will be effected in accordance. The clung to ideas will be projecting experience for as long as the ideas are clung to, and into future lifetimes also. What happens then is that when the body vehicle transpires, and we transition, and when we assume a new body vehicle, it comes equipped with it a new mind, a mental vehicle absent of files, like a new computer. However, the ideas we had agreed and clung to from the previous lifetime on transition had rather been transferred to the causal memory body. And as we assume our new body vehicle with its fresh, file-free computer memory vehicle, the ideas, agreements, and attachments we had maintained from the previous lifetime still are a part of our overall consciousness. It's just we are now unconscious of them, yet they will still be generating experience. And as these idea agreement files are constantly added to, each lifetime around, and we become unconscious of them, they all become then the subconscious, the vast bulk of the consciousness, where experience will be continuously effected from them until they are addressed, consciously revealed, and released. And consider all the agreements we have made, the ideas we have decided on, the attachments to individuals we have forged throughout all the endless simulated lifetimes we have lived. And although unconscious of the bulk of all these effect-generating ideas, situations and circumstances will generate from them, even if they are those we may consider unsavoury, and that which we couldn't possibly have wanted to experience. For we can agree with ideas that effect adverse situations just as readily as ideas that generate pleasant experiences. If, say, we were marketed into agreeing with ideas that seemed beneficial on the surface, but were anything but, and these agreement to ideas, with their corresponding unsavoury potential effects, become subconscious over lifetimes, and will generate these experiences continuously until addressed. Hence how virtually every being in the simulator experiences control and imposition, stemming from long ago secured agreements to control that are now subconscious, but still effecting experience that reflects the nature of such ideas. This can apply to individuals also, for as we agree to individuals, we agree to their consciousness and how it is designed. We take on that idea package, as we effectively are deciding to experience it. Agree to an abrasive consciousness, then that's what you experience. And if you are marketed into agreeing with an abrasive consciousness, and to agree to being subservient to the individual whose consciousness it is, you have decided to experience not only an abrasive consciousness, but being subjugated, controlled, and adversely impacted by the individual whose consciousness it is. Again, this is how the controllers not only are imposing and abrasive in their decided consciousness, but can be so to the detriment of others in the experience of most in this simulator at this time. In lifetimes past, there were undoubtedly creationally powerful beings who presented as rulers and dictators, who very likely inspired worship, agreement, and acquiescence to their power. And as lifetimes rolled on, all those who did once agree, who installed this idea into their consciousness, such agreements they are now unconscious of, but the potentiality remains that these powerful beings can at any time feature in their experience, regardless of how many lifetimes have passed by, and exact their decided abrasiveness as per the nature of the agreement extended to them. The example would be that which befalls Dana in the movie, as she is targeted by a creationally powerful being who once had dominion and agreements at some stage long ago in cause and effect simulator history. Very likely we may surmise that Dana was a devotee to this being many lifetimes ago, and this agreement remains in the subconscious, and consequently, if the situations and circumstances are just right, so can this being feature in her experience again, and infringe upon her experience adversely, as after all, Dana's consciousness is constructed that she has decided this to always be an experiential possibility. And so it is that with such attacks there must be agreements in the consciousness, very likely subconscious, that facilitate such. Hence the importance of facing the self, working through these agreements and attachments, and releasing them, that such situations are avoidable. And possession, as was the case with Dana in the movie, is a very real phenomena, as beings can take control of the body vehicles of others, again as agreement permissions allow that they can. Very often entities are the beings which most commonly possess the body vehicles of others, and the means by which they do so may stem from agreements already present in the consciousness, but also through aligning with a being or the arena in creation they reside in, as this is a tantamount to agreement that effectively allows them access to your experience and to do what they do. If through heavy metal music, as an example, aligns you with the lower astral, as it does, as the frequencies of this part of the astral and this type of music matches, so is this agreement with the lower astral and that which resides there, the various demons, entities, etc. And again, agree with a consciousness, and you are deciding to experience what the decided construction of the consciousness happens to be. Align with the lower astral, agree then with it and that which it contains, and you are deciding to experience, very likely, a possession potentially, as this is the nature of the kind of consciousness that effects into the lower astral. And mention in the movie was made as to how an individual made a connection with the position in life that this demonic Gozer character resided in, how he formed a secret society, incorporating sacrifice, etc., and with everything equaling itself, so will what we decide not only effect the corresponding experience, but align with also other individuals and positions in life that match that which we do and decide. Like attracts like, and many secret societies and groups do dabble with the psychic sciences and attempt to make contact with beings demons and such, through what they would call sympathetic magic, which is aligning yourself with such creatures and the places they reside through the actions you take, decisions, focus, etc., converging frequencies, in other words. And very often such activities can have dire consequences for the psychic science and black magic dabbler, as to agree with such dark beings and demons will have you taking their decided consciousness construct into your experience. And if you happen to also harbour any agreements that also allow them to exact harm upon you, if there are agreements to control that you may be unconscious of, that incorporate the creature you have contacted, then you will have rather an adverse experience. Mention was made in the movie of how, at the end times, the dead walk the earth, how demons and entities are able to feature on the physical. And these accounts have been recorded in various texts and such, very likely experiences recollected and collated from moments where simulators were entering their demise cycles. For a simulator will always be the effect of the overall consciousness. And as the consciousness becomes compacted with ideas of restriction, as it inevitably, generally will, so the affected simulator goes through its cycles of deterioration. It seems a feature of simulator deterioration, especially when a simulator is nearing its final demise and death spiral to implosion, is that there is a kind of fraying between the life level dimensions, as though the frequencies that separated them become more so aligned as everything compacts in on itself. As such, what would have been separated in frequency life level terms, and the beings that reside in each respective life level can more readily feature in areas of creation they were previously unable to. And as you might imagine, were the lower astral, with all the distorted consciousness of beings it contains, to align with the physical and allow access for such creatures, then very likely, as has been recorded, demons, entities, beings of this nature may well walk the physical level. And in regards to capturing and containing what would be an astral-based being, what was considered a ghost in the movie, using their photon beams and containment facilities, you would have to encase them in a frequency field that was the same as that which their form comprises of, that would then present as solidity for them. For what seems solid on the astral, as we transition there, to the heavens of man, say, would be due to the astral vehicle being of the same frequency as the environment there. And indeed, on the astral, there are prisons that the Calorm god can contain you in if he so decides, although that would again be based on your agreement that you are so restricted, as a simple thought would render you free if you did but realize this. So to contain an astral-based being, or any being really, you would need to determine the frequency of the body form they occupy, and in theory the corresponding frequency could thus contain them. As for them, it would seem as a solid barrier, just as it is on the physical level. Anything solid is in fact that which is of the same electromagnetic frequency as our physical bodies, as frequency fields that are the same or similar will repel each other and present as solidity. Bearing in mind everything is holographic and simulated, so in reality nothing can be solid as we understand the term. It's just how electromagnetic energy fields interact with each other. In other words, how created ideas, which in their base form are frequency fields, are in relationship with each other.
Yes, that's like Nikola Tesla stuff, huh? Frequencies. Or is it energy, frequency, and vibration about all this physical stuff, or even the non-physical, huh? The energy.
Yeah. Well, interesting. They wanted to contain them, you know. Well, they were making mayhem there. They were being mischievous and doing all kinds of funny things there in the physical, so they had to take care of them. They're kind of a police, Ghostbusters police squad. Basically, everybody has a right to do anything they want, but just without interfering with others, you know. So these entities are walking around us all the time, actually, but we don't see them. But if they're not doing any harm or nuisance, and that, you know, everybody's got their own space, dimensional space, wherever they're at. It's just that nowadays there's so much interference with what the controllers are doing that something has to be done to offset it, because people aren't allowed to do what they do. And I see here, just got the latest news update. Florida governor has imposed a $5,000 fine for those businesses that or schools that ask for a vaccination certificate. So if you're a business and you require vaccination ID or proof of vaccination, you can be fined $5,000. So this is like people are stepping up and doing something, you know, and they've got the state law. It was passed through their legislation, whereas the executive president as the executive cannot impose state laws on the state level with a mandate, which it hasn't even gone through the legislative body. Okay. Well, that was a fun movie, yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kevin, for all that, and for doing all the work there. We'll sing New You to finish it here, and we'll see you next week on Reel to Wheel Wake Up. New you. Peter?
New.
Tim?
New you.